So thanks again for the opportunity to share today, Billy and Renee. If y'all don't know me, I've been on here a couple times now, but I'm Lee Moser, and I'm an Agriculture Extension Associate for Water Quality and Quantity Issues in Kentucky, and that includes groundwater awareness and protection. So my experience with groundwater monitoring and protection has been through my work in environmental consulting, managing groundwater compliance monitoring, and reporting associated with the coal industry in the state, as well as addressing issues like sinkhole protection through our outreach related to the Kentucky Ag Water Quality Plan. So I'm here today to help celebrate Groundwater Awareness Week. Groundwater Awareness Week takes place March 10th through 16th in 2024, so we're right in the middle of it. So it's a great day to be talking about groundwater. Groundwater Awareness Week is an annual observance established in 1999 to highlight the responsible development, management, and use of groundwater. It's also an opportunity to encourage yearly groundwater well testing and well maintenance, and the promotion of policies impacting groundwater quality and supply. Groundwater advocates across the country use Groundwater Awareness Week to highlight local water issues in their communities. So we'll be doing just that today. If I can advance my slide. There we go. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to have a general overview of groundwater. We're going to kind of zoom out to the worldwide context of groundwater, look at the overall trends of groundwater use and issues in the United States. And we'll do the same for Kentucky in specific. And then we'll have some recommendations and resources for ways that landowners can protect groundwater on their property. So I like to start off many of my talks on the water topics with this diagram of the water cycle, because I think it really puts whatever part of the water cycle I'm focusing on in my talk into the greater context of just how complex and connected water management issues can be on our landscape. We often think about the above ground parts of the water cycle, evaporation, condensation, precipitation, but what happens when water gets into the ground? As Billy and Renee mentioned earlier, it's often easily overlooked. So we'll be zooming in on that a bit and connecting with groundwater components of the water cycle. So what exactly is groundwater? Groundwater is the water that fills the cracks and other openings in the beds of rocks and sand below the soil zone, as shown in this image. When precipitation hits the ground, it can infiltrate into the soil or evaporate back into the atmosphere. Could run off too. Water then enters the soil, and then it can either be held by the soil for use by plants or other organisms, and then continue down into the soil, percolate down into the water table. And the water table in this image is denoted by the upside down triangle that you see, kind of small there. Let me see if I can get my pointer. Doot. And basically that's the top of the saturated zone. That's where we find groundwater. Turn my pointer off. So an important groundwater term that you've probably heard of is an aquifer. The United States Geologic Survey simply defines an aquifer as a geologic formation that is water-bearing. Pretty intuitive, right? So you see two different types of aquifers in this photo. A confined aquifer, which is confined between two impermeable layers, and an unconfined aquifer, which is what we generally refer to as a water table aquifer. One thing that you also see in this picture is that there's a stream that's pretty well connected, presumably to that unconfined water table aquifer. And that's really important because groundwater provides base flow for many of our streams. So there's that connection that we often don't see or think about sometimes, but it's really important. And when we talk about water quality and quantity issues, that connection is critical. So one of the challenges with groundwater use is that groundwater withdrawal from pumping can impact groundwater levels, and our rate of use often outpaces the rate of recharge in aquifers. And groundwater depletion is a serious concern, specifically here in the United States. We'll focus in on that here in a little bit. So worldwide, fresh groundwater is a major source of water for irrigation and agriculture, domestic use, and industry. Again, the United States Geologic Survey estimates that of all the world's water, fresh water makes up roughly 2.5% of all water. And roughly 30% of that 2.5% is groundwater. So if you do the math, that's 0.76% of all water on Earth is fresh groundwater. So that's not a lot in the grand scheme of things. So it's a really valuable, important resource that we use a lot. It should also be noted that there's saline groundwater, but we won't focus on that because we don't really use that for uses like irrigation, domestic use, or industry. So, from these 2010 figures from the National Groundwater Association, we can see that we're in the top three users, along with India and China, of groundwater for those major uses that I previously mentioned, being irrigation, domestic use, and industry. So, according to the National Groundwater Association, groundwater is the most extracted raw material worldwide, with approximately 70% of groundwater withdrawals being used for agriculture worldwide. And this is one of the many reasons we focus on water quality and quantity issues here in the College of Agriculture, Food and Environment at the University of Kentucky. In reality, fresh water is scarce, so efficient, judicious use and protecting its quality is critical to our food system and the environment in general. I mentioned earlier that shallow groundwater helps provide base flow for our streams. So if you like recreating in our streams out there, it plays an important role in that too. Another important thing to be aware of is that around half the world's drinking water comes from groundwater. That's something that folks may not realize. So, just as a breakdown of how we use fresh water in the United States in terms of surface water versus groundwater, in the US, fresh groundwater accounts for roughly 30% of the source of fresh water supply as of 2015. Top three uses of fresh groundwater in the US are irrigation, public water supply, and domestic supply. And then the nature of these three uses being for food production, potable water, highlight the importance of protecting groundwater quality. I mean, if we're going to be using them to irrigate our food and drink in our tap water, we want to make sure that the quality coming into those systems is as clean as possible, right? So several slides back, I mentioned the issue of groundwater depletion. And these are some of the major aquifers in the United States, and nearly all of them, except for some of the ones up in the Pacific Northwest and in Idaho, are experiencing significant depletion. And it may be no surprise that many of these identified aquifers that are experiencing depletion are major agricultural production regions that rely on groundwater for irrigation. So when we think of groundwater and being aware of groundwater, it's not just the quality, it's also the quantity and the efficiency of use. So we'll start to kind of hone in on Kentucky a bit here. And believe it or not, groundwater played an important role in the history of where many of our first settlements in Kentucky were founded. Our original settlers often located their camps and eventual cities near springs due to the reliable, clean water. This photo was actually taken yesterday at an environmental education event at McConnell Springs. This is their Blue Hole, which is a historic site that was where Lexington was essentially first settled and eventually founded. So here in Kentucky, about 5% of the water that we use every day is from groundwater sources. More than 1.5 million Kentuckians are served by 185 public water supply systems that rely on groundwater. That is something that before doing research for this presentation, I didn't realize how many public water supplies in Kentucky rely on groundwater. And then on top of that, another 416,000 Kentuckians use water wells or springs to provide themselves with drinking water. In Kentucky, water use patterns for major uses are very similar to national trends, with public and domestic use leading and industrial and mining use being greater than agriculture in Kentucky, since we have considerably less irrigation from groundwater than the nation as a whole. So groundwater quality is a major concern when we're discussing groundwater in the context of all these different uses. And the vulnerability of groundwater to pollution from activities on the surface varies across the state depending on the land use, but also the dominant geology of the area. So we often discuss this in the water resource management world in terms of groundwater sensitivity. And that refers to the susceptibility of the groundwater in the aquifer to pollution impacts from land use. And the susceptibility of the groundwater in the aquifer can be conceptualized and thought of in terms of how fast water flows through the aquifer, how predictable the flow direction is in the aquifer, and how much filtering the aquifer actually does. So if you're in an area like a karst aquifer, which I'll talk a little bit about here in just a second, like we have here around central Kentucky, water moves through it very rapidly through the voids and channels. If you're in an alluvial aquifer, I say out in western Kentucky, you might have more opportunity for filtration through some of the layers out there. So again, there's that karst word. I mentioned it, I know the last time that I was on the show. And it's no surprise that those bright orange areas that we saw on the groundwater sensitivity map, those that are the highest groundwater sensitivity rating across the state, they line up pretty much identically with the karst presence in Kentucky. And just as a reminder, about 55% of the state of Kentucky is underlain by rock with karst potential. So that can make managing for groundwater quality, a challenge at times, to say the least. Um, so just as kind of a review, I've discussed karst in the past, as I mentioned, but karst is a word used to describe a landscape that's underlain by dissolvable rock, and in our case, that's limestone. And it's known for a surface that's interspersed with sinkholes, sinking streams, caves, and springs, as shown in this image. So that being said, the potential for surface contaminants interacting with groundwater in this type of environment is quite high. So one of my favorite sayings is, if it's on the ground, it's in the water, and potentially going to our streams and potentially going into the groundwater in many of our areas of the state. So here are a few recommendations that may be helpful to protect water quality on your property. This isn't an exhaustive list, but these are the ones that most readily came to mind as I was doing a little research and preparing for this presentation. So ensuring that you're properly disposing of household wastes and protecting sinkholes from disposal of any of those wastes. Regularly inspecting and maintaining septic systems is really important in Kentucky, especially if you're in some of those areas of high karst potential. Making sure that we're restricting livestock access as much as possible and practicing nutrient management in agricultural operations to reduce the potential impact of fertilizer, manure, pesticides getting into groundwater systems can be really helpful for protecting groundwater quality. And then if you're able and you have the room, it's always recommended to develop vegetative buffers around any sensitive features, including streams, but sinkholes and any other karst features that you may have that are visible in your property that you're aware of. And then another challenge sometimes specifically mentioned a lot in the literature with underground storage tanks is inspecting them to make sure that they're properly maintained and not leaking, because that can certainly impact groundwater quality. So I'm going to end this presentation with sort of a parade of resources so that this can kind of be something that folks reference back to if they're interested in groundwater quality issues, so that they can find some of the resources specific to the state of Kentucky. So the next several slides will have QR codes and links to provide you with access if you need to come back and figure out ways that you can work on groundwater quality on your property. So the Kentucky Division of Water provides resources for homeowners utilizing cisterns and wells for drinking water to help identify certified water labs near their location to test the quality of their water. They also provide links to resources from CDC on maintenance, testing, treatment, and general water quality guidance on the various parameters that they recommend. So checking out this link and the resources that Kentucky Division of Water has related to groundwater quality testing is really important as a homeowner or anyone that has a well that they're using for water supply. Another thing that can be really helpful is developing and implementing a groundwater protection plan. This is more applicable to regulated industries and activities that are more in the line of commercial, industrial, and mining related activities, construction. But it's good to be aware of groundwater protection plan requirements, and it may be something that could be generally helpful to a landowner. And it's essentially a way just to identify risks and vulnerabilities on a property and identify best management practices that can be utilized to protect groundwater quality. So when we think about a drinking water source, one of the key aspects to protecting water quality is what we call source water protection. So the Division of Water has a source water protection, wellhead protection program that I wanted to highlight. Source water protection is about ensuring safe and adequate drinking water supplies, which requires maintaining the quality and availability of present and future water supply sources. Wellhead protection is an important part of source water protection in Kentucky since we do utilize groundwater for a considerable number of our domestic water supply intakes, and they require high quality water to reduce the cost of treatment. And this is one that I always like to stress. If you're out there on the land and you've got property, if you have 10 acres or more and you're actively engaged in agriculture or forestry, a Kentucky law requires to develop and implement an ag water quality plan. And some of those best management practices, specifically best management practice number 4 from silviculture or forestry, is related to the protection of sinkholes. So check out the resources that are available related to developing an ag water quality plan, can provide a lot of helpful guidance. They've got some really interesting and useful BMP one-pager sheets that provide a lot of information on the costs, benefits, and operation and maintenance of many of the best management practices that might be useful in your operation that could help protect groundwater quality, but also surface water quality. We care about that a lot too, because as we've highlighted, they're intricately connected. So through extension, we've also got some really great resources that I wanted to highlight with some more QR codes and links so you can find them for yourselves. And these are titled Groundwater Quality, Sinkhole Management for Agricultural Producers, and then some of the fact sheets that were produced related to the Ag Water Quality Best Management Practice number 4, related to sinkholes in the silviculture section of the Kentucky Ag Water Quality Plan, specifically address that groundwater component. But a lot of the best management practices associated with things like streamside management zones, just things that protect general water quality, also have a real strong potential to protect groundwater quality here in Kentucky, depending on where you're at, as we've learned today. And I don't know if we have any fellow map nerds out there, but I consider myself kind of a map nerd. So here in Kentucky, we have a lot of really great groundwater mapping resources, and I wanted to highlight 3. And these are resources that are available through the Kentucky Division of Water's Water Maps portal. They have a variety of different maps, interactive web maps, so you don't have to have specialized geographic information system software. You can just click on this link and find whatever topic you're interested in. Several of them are specifically related to groundwater and groundwater quality, and browse till your heart's content and figure out what groundwater resources and groundwater quality looks like around you. And then we have this amazing resource that a lot of folks may not be aware of, the Kentucky Geologic Survey, and they have a plethora of historic data that also has a lot of current data related to groundwater well monitoring data and the results from decades of research and compliance monitoring and just general monitoring from private and public wells. So that's a great resource to check out if you're concerned or interested in groundwater quality. They also have a lot of really good interactive web maps that they share through that link as well. It's not just a database. And then if you are a desktop GIS person, this is a site down on the bottom, the Kentucky Gov Maps open data portal that I use a lot. It's going to have pretty much any Kentucky specific official Kentucky GIS layers that you'd be interested in. And a lot of those include things like sinkhole locations, groundwater well locations, groundwater quality monitoring results, but also those things like our watersheds and all the different stream layers that we have for Kentucky that can be really important when we're trying to consider an overall impact of land use on groundwater. So, one thing I need to highlight today is that Lexington Water Week is coming up. So, if you're in the Lexington area, or you want to travel to Lexington between the 16th and 23rd, we've got a lot of amazing events. College of Agriculture, Food and Environment is a sponsor along with LFUCG of Water Week, and this is actually the fifth Water Week. So we're really excited to bring a lot of great outreach events to the community, public engagement, and just interactive participatory science opportunities. So it's a week of activities for all ages, abilities, and interests. So check out Water Week if that's something that interests you. And I got to plug one more thing. Some of the work that my team does with agricultural best management practices, we're partnering for a field day coming up with Loretto Mother House Farm to share some of the work being done by Cody and Angela Rakes and their team to protect water quality through use of many of our Kentucky Ag Water Quality Plan best management practices. So if you're in the Marion County area or want to travel down around Marion County, it's a beautiful place to go visit, great people. Reach out to Angela and come join us on Saturday, April 6th from 9 to 12, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. noon. So that's what I've got for you today. If there are any questions, feel free to pop them in chat or we can hang